All right, so bienvenue tout le monde to PAFSO's Tradecraft Week. Today's session is a panel discussion focusing on first posting experiences from the perspective of accompanying spouses or partners. This is a reminder that the session is being recorded to be posted on PAFSO's YouTube channel at a later date. We do also want to acknowledge that PAFSO is hosting this Tradecraft Week on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. PAFSO acknowledges them as the past, present, and future caretakers of that land. So my name is Megan Dalby. I am a senior immigration officer with Immigration and Refugee Citizenship Canada. I'm currently on posting in Ankara. I will be your moderator today, and it brings me great pleasure to introduce you to our four panelists, all of whom are founding members of the recently created Canadian Diplomatic Family Network, Réseau des Familles Diplomatiques du Canada. If you would like to know more about this network, I would encourage you to join the conversation on the Canadian Diplomatic Spouses and Partners Facebook page. You can find the link for that group in the comments. I do want to remind you to please answer the questions if you'd like to join the group. So I'm going to go right ahead and introduce you to our four panelists. So first of all, we have Feli Bowen. She is of Australian origin and currently residing in Ottawa with her Canadian Foreign Service spouse. She's been on previous postings as either a Foreign Service officer herself or accompanying her partner to Beijing, Tunis, Warsaw, Singapore, Ghana, and Manila. Her background is predominantly in the private sector in projects related to risk and security analysis. She has an 11-year-old daughter who has spent most of her life abroad. Next up, we have Heather McRan, who is also in Ottawa at the moment and is hoping to go out on post with her family in 2025. She's previously been on postings with her spouse to Germany, Croatia, and Morocco, and has spent a total of 22 years as an accompanying spouse with 3 kids raised mostly abroad. She's focused many of these years on volunteer roles, aiming to make a difference in the local and expat communities. Next up, we have Patrick Pilon, who's currently in Kazakhstan, following a 4-year post in Ankara. He and his family are rotating to Sao Paulo later this summer. He is a freelance digital storyteller, AI-powered graphics and animation specialist, videographer, editor, motion graphic designer, web designer, developer, and father of 3. Lastly, we have Chris Stewart, who's currently in Myanmar, accompanying his spouse, who is the head of mission there. His previous postings have taken him to Greece, Pakistan, Cambodia, and a short temporary duty in Japan. He's been working as a professional photographer, video specialist, writer, and illustrator for more than 20 years. So now that you have gotten to know our panelists a little bit, we're going to launch right into our first topic, which is I Wish I'd Known. As you can imagine, there is a wealth of experience that these 4 panelists have experienced in all of those diverse postings. So each of them will take about 5 minutes to share some of their tips and tricks and philosophies that they've picked up along the way. So I'm going to ask Feli, if you wouldn't mind starting, please go ahead.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks to everyone who's organised this. So this is a really great opportunity, and some of the things that I wish I'd known, I wish we had something like this when I first went out on posting, because there was more, so I hope that everybody gets something out of it. I thought I would start off with some of the practical things that I wish that I had known before I went out, and not necessarily on the first posting, but subsequent postings as well. But when I first went, as Megan mentioned, I'm Australian. I didn't have a lot of knowledge about the Canadian landscape. And so one of the things I wish I had been more cognizant about and had more awareness of were financial matters, tax matters, financial matters, and the impact that would have like 10, 20 years later. I've been married for 16 years, but more awareness of looking into the future in regards to financial investments, the impact it would have on not working for a period of time, the impact that would have on retirement. And so I would definitely, if I were to go back again, I guess, I would go down to the bank, I would have a conversation. I would learn more about tax-free investment accounts, other investments. I would understand my partner's pension more, what sort of things that we could do to plan for the future. So that's one thing that I just wish I had become a little bit more knowledgeable about earlier on, and that I had planned for, because the first posting, super excited, not really thinking about those things, but it is something I think that we should all be more aware of, and especially for partners who are following. There is obviously a lack of independence on the financial sphere. I was the one that did give up a full-time job. So there was definitely an impact there that I should have been, I guess, more aware of at the time. The other thing I wanted to mention on a practical side was medication. So flipping to the medication side is being aware of what can and cannot be shipped through the diplomatic bag. And there is understandably a whole range of reasons from a security, personal health point of view that would limit sending those things through the diplomatic bag. So I would recommend to people to do their research for themselves and their families, and understand what is available in the country that you're being posted to, what are the options for you, and what you can and cannot ship through the bag. Don't take it for granted. Just as I could access this, but my first posting when I was with the Australian government in the Philippines, I remember going in to get the pill. And every time I went to get a prescription for the pill, I had to endure like a good 20 minutes of being told off for being a single woman who was requesting the pill. And in the end, I ended up going back to my doctor in Australia when I went back, and I said, can you just give me 6 months worth every time I leave? Because it just became so painful and humiliating, and something that we take for granted, but it was difficult to get the one that I wanted. So that's fairly simple and something we take for granted, but I would recommend people do their research. And I don't want to take up other people's time, so I'm just going to finish with one last thing that I actually just thought of yesterday. I was speaking to my husband, and I would recommend that people, in which actually he had thought of this, I wasn't aware of it, but choosing to have your child overseas can have an impact on them in the future, depending on the documentation that you keep. And I would recommend that you look into the first generation limit on the IRCC website. Look at the impact that possibly could have on you and what you may need to keep in terms of documentation should your child then marry someone who is not Canadian, and then they choose to try and pass their citizenship on to your then grandchildren. It is not something that you think about, but it is something that was changed in legislation in 2009, and there is actually discussion about it right now if you were to Google it and look at it in the news. But is something that is worth looking into from a practical point of view that can have an impact, and not something that we think about when we're overseas and deciding to have children overseas. And I can't speak to that because I'm not. Megan probably knows a lot more about that, but I would just, that was probably my last practical point in terms of advice of things that I'd been more aware of prior to going and posting. And luckily, actually, on the last one, my husband was very well aware of it and had planned for that. So I will, they're my 3 points, and I'll pass it on to the others. And I hope I didn't cross over with anything anyone else is going to say, but I don't think so. So thanks a lot, Meg.
Fantastic. Thanks, Feli. Some really important practicalities to keep in mind for sure. And I will also encourage at any time, I see there's a couple people that are putting questions in the chat. Feel free to put your questions there, and the rest of us panelists, we can try to answer those questions as well while other people are speaking. So next up, I'd like to ask Heather, please, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me, for organizing this, Meg. I appreciate it. From a practical standpoint, I would recommend understanding the FSDs more, like having a spouse understand that. When we went on our first posting, I had a 15-year-old daughter, 16-year-old daughter going into grade 11, a 2-year-old, and then was pregnant within 2 weeks arriving at post. So I wasn't in the headspace that I maybe should have taken a minute to focus on those things. I left it all to my husband, which was great. He did a really great job with many things. But even now, many years later, I'm still learning all sorts of stuff that it probably would have been helpful to know in advance. Another thing from a practical standpoint, something that people think you think about, going to the doctor, getting any kind of preventative testing done, like Fede was saying, getting prescriptions, etc. You think of it, but it gets so busy. You're so focused on moving on maybe your family unit, that those things get put to the side, especially for the employee. They're working often until they're going on posting, get to a new post, they hit the ground running, they're off and gone, takes a while to get used to the new healthcare system. So to really seriously take a minute to get those things in order. It's not a very nice thing to share, but foreign service officers do actually have a shorter life expectancy. I don't know if you guys know that. Because of this, things are missed that could have been caught if you had annual physicals. So that's sort of my mom spiel there. Get everybody to the doctor, get those things under control. And also if you end up cross-posting, we found out the hard way that although Health Canada is meant to, you have to go and have your physical, and they check everything off in the country that you're posted to, send it to Health Canada. They say, okay, yeah, you can go to post. They did not tell us of vaccines that other people were getting when they were leaving from Canada to Morocco in that instance. So that's something just to sort of pay attention to yourself. Like I was expecting that system would be safe enough that they would catch, and they didn't. We were all fine, but I found out when we got there that people got rabies shots and all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, what? Nobody even mentioned it. So anyways, it's sort of thing. From I'm going to say like a soft side of things with going to posting, but it is very important. I encourage both people, not just the spouse, but also the employee, when possible, to connect with other expats that are in the same situations. Most capital cities, certainly, and even smaller cities and locations with our consulates have expat communities, international clubs. The British women often have a club, American women that now do tend to incorporate men as well. And those are just great ways to make connections, learn about your new home, find out about groceries, etc., and hit the ground running with some fun to it too. And it's so nice to connect with people who have maybe been at that post for a year or two, or longer, and can tell you, this gets better, or focus on this. That's fun, and and it helps. From my personal experience aside, as Meg mentioned, I put my personal career aside. Actually, before we even my husband joined the Foreign Service, we just decided that we wanted to focus more on things that were of value to us, that whatever we were working on was good for our souls. So he chose the international route, moving us around. And that work as a political officer and a trade officer at the beginning. And I decided to focus on the family for a little while. Now, that's been many years, much more than I expected, but I have fallen into a role kind of as a professional volunteer, I call myself. Over the years, I've kind of struggled with the fact that it's a volunteer work, we're not getting paid, and our culture focuses so much on, but such a value on financial remuneration, that the value in what you're actually doing, the work that you're actually doing, and that matters, gets lost along the way in our own minds, not to other people. I've been the president of the International Women's Club in Zagreb. I co-founded the International Club of Rabat in Morocco, and over the years, I've kind of come up in my own mind of the value that I have gained by doing work, focusing on those activities, and working with the schools, being on the school boards of our children's schools, and helping raise money and work with organizations focusing on women and children in the countries that we've been in primarily, has really true intrinsic value, and to not allow ourselves to belittle that work. It matters. And as you'll hear from many spouses, and today, that is a true change, a sacrifice that is often made by the spouse, the accompanying spouse, giving up a job or a career or a change. And I think our culture we put too much focus on that, and if life's an adventure, allow yourself to enjoy the stages that you're at. That's all I have for now.
That's great, Heather. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's going to be a common theme. I see there's some questions about it. Hopefully, we're going to have a bit more of a discussion towards the end, but definitely finding a purpose in a new environment and in amongst a new community is one of the biggest challenges, and people go about it in different ways. So thank you for that. Next up, we will hear from Patrick. Thanks, Patrick.
Hi, thanks, Meg. It's interesting that we talk about finding a purpose because I tried a lot to find a purpose before I left, but then I realized that I needed to arrive, settle, and understand what our new beat was in order to find mine. So in the I wish I've known, I'd say that I wish I'd known that I didn't have to work until the last day before our departure, because quickly after flying out, my old job became my past and I had to focus on our new life. So I wish I took more time to understand all these different aspects of our move. It would have made it much easier. So I think there are a lot of advantages of having a job lined up when you arrive. I was in that situation in our second posting. However, when you arrive without a job, there are lots of advantages as well, especially if you have kids. I was the only one available to understand everything about our new daily life because my wife, as Heather said, they pretty much, what's the expression again? Arrive running or
Ground running.
So yeah. So you are the person who's understanding everything. The spouse is understanding what's the grocery like, what's the logistic in that new life. So my role was essential and important when we arrived. And I ended up finding that focusing on finding a new job wasn't a priority. I had to arrive and get settled, and that was my priority. So it quickly became pretty useful for my family and for other Canadians that were arriving the same summer to share the information that I was finding and the way of life, tips and tricks about living in that post. Because sometimes, finding a broom or a vacuum bag can become a full day quest across the city. Just because first there's a language issue, but the model of your vacuum is probably not the same that they have in that country. So I might have been the dependent on paper, but quickly my working spouse and our 3 children became dependent on me to be able to navigate through that new school and new job and new life. So I ended up finding that my role was really important there. One more thing that I wish I've known is to not underestimate the importance of understanding the moving process. So Heather mentioned the FSD. FSD is one thing. I didn't took enough time to understand it. I wish I read more about how they apply to our situation. We kind of learned about it as we were going. I wish that I'd read the mission report again before leaving, because I read it before when we submitted our choices months before, but just before leaving, it's also pretty useful. Understanding all the different aspects of the move, that would have made it much easier. So I did receive information. Your spouse will receive a lot of documentation, welcome guide, arrival guide, mission report, all these. You want to have access to that, and you want to read it too. This was pretty much my problem. I had it, but I didn't took enough time to read it. So knowing what to expect would have reduced my stress and helped everything. I wish I'd known about the emotional roller coaster of the first weeks, because the first weeks were a mix of excitement, challenges, but also moments of frustration. There's a high when you arrive and discover everything, but when kids started school and things got quiet at home, I was left pretty much alone to cope with all that. So that's when I started taking the time to explore the training option for new career opportunities. In my pre-posting life, I rarely stopped my daily routine to think about that. I was working on a daily basis, but I never thought about what else can I do, and trying to figure out a way to work from different countries, because most of the time, we didn't know at the time, we were leaving for 3 years, but it's been 7 and we're going in another 3 years. So I'm glad I ended up finding something that I can carry with me professionally. But it's a very good opportunity, I think. It's like an early retirement, but then you can think about what you want to do. And volunteering is also a great door into the expat community that helped me a lot to meet people. Another thing I wish I've known was the impact on my ego of quitting my job. So I talked about how I worked until the last day, but when I arrived, I felt pretty much incompetent and helpless. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know about anything. I struggled on everyday tasks. And if you have kids, remember how your life changed when the kids arrived, and how remembering the good old days of before and wanting to go back to those days, it never helped. So it's pretty much the same. You're not going back to how it was just before your posting. So to me, it was a big change. I worked from 9 to 5 for 13 years, and leaving that routine was pretty challenging at first. And it required a lot of time to build a freelancing business as well. But when we left, I must say that I felt like I was being dragged along. So I built kind of a resentment, and that was not good for our family, or especially for myself. At some point, I finally moved on and accepted that I wasn't a victim in all this, but we chose this life, and that life was bringing us a lot of opportunities. And it's a very rich life in terms of all the experience that you get to do. So I had to accept that. And I'm glad I took my time, professionally speaking, to build something and take the time to find what I wanted to do on the long run. So go easy on yourself. And being spouse, I don't like the word trailing spouse, but that's how it's called. You're not doing nothing. It's very intense what you're doing. You're learning intensively about a foreign country, school system, and your working spouse will probably rely a lot on you to understand how things works in the daily life. So I'd say allow yourself to grow and learn from all these things. One more thing I wish I've known is to stay connected with loved ones. It seemed complicated with the time difference and everything, but I realized that sharing my discovery helped a lot. It helped me appreciate this new life. My partner wasn't always available to talk about that after a long day of work. So when I gave up on trying to plan the perfect time that fits everyone's schedule for a phone call, and I just started reaching out randomly to friends and family members, I ended up having perhaps shorter but more frequent discussions with them. So it helped me a lot to keep a sense of connection. I can go on again with I had 2 more things that I forgot. I wish I'd known to be cautious of expats who have developed a negative attitude toward the host country. So some people seems to reveal in negativity and are eager to share their discontent with newcomers. And I found out it's important to avoid these people, especially during the initial adjustment period. Their negativity can be contagious. So instead, I seek out positive and well-adjusted expat and locals who can offer support and guidance. Locals love to share their knowledge about the host country to you. And so surrounding myself with optimistic people really made a better experience. So it made it more enjoyable too. And I wish I've known that I was romanticizing about my pre-posting life. So it was natural to miss some aspect of my former life, but I wish I knew that in fact I was idealizing it. So when I took the time to remember those challenges and less enjoyable aspects of that pre-posting life, I realized it wasn't a pink cloud as I tend to remember. And we had challenge then too. So comparing my past to my new life was meaningless. And especially between posting, I did that a lot between Turkey and Kazakhstan. Oh, in Turkey, things were like that. In Turkey, things were like this, but I'm not in Turkey anymore. So on our second posting, let's say that resilience and adaptability were key for a smooth transition. And now I'm packing right now for our third posting. So I'm trying to change my the way I see it. And I don't want to be nostalgic about our time here. And I'll try a different approach this time. Thanks.
Amazing. Thanks for all those bits of information, and thanks for taking time while you're in the midst of pre-moving chaos. We all know a little bit about that. Yeah, I'll just before I turn it over, Chris, I just want to maybe grab one of those last items that Patrick mentioned, and that's avoiding the negativity. And so he mentioned it sort of in the realm of sort of the expat world, but I would also say that you can also use that strategy in speaking with other government employees, other dependents, because whatever network you're in, you will hear a lot of that. And granted, there's many things that we can kind of focus on that could be better. And it's one of the reasons we created the network that we're going to talk about a bit more at the end, is to try to, instead of just kind of complaining about the things that could be better, actually trying to action some things that we can make improvements on. But yeah, I think it's something that can serve everyone really well, is looking for areas and opportunities to improve rather than focusing on the things that bother us and drive us crazy. Okay, with that, over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Hello. So I sort of had two ideas of things to talk about. One of the things was, I wish I knew how to present myself when I was getting into this, because really you have two lives when you're posted abroad. There's the diplomat side, and then there's this sort of your own personality. And to some degree, you have to sort of balance that out a little bit and figure out what that is, because there's sort of, I have this particularly now more so because my wife is the head of mission. So we have to go to formal events and meet important people and all that. And so what I found was it's this weird balance of following the political etiquette and protocol, making sure you sit at the right place at the right table, use the correct fork and everything like that. But on the other hand, also putting your own, you have to sort of find a way to put your own personality out there at the same time. So make sure that you're not this sort of robot of etiquette, but make sure you're also the person that you want to be as well. So that's something that I wish, it's something to think about when you're going to post. You can't really plan it that much, but know that, etiquette and protocol is there for a reason. It's mostly there to make sure that people feel comfortable and know what's happening at an event. It's like, knowing what order you need to wait in line, stand in line when you're shaking people's hands. It's so you know where to stand. Knowing where to sit in a car when you're in a motorcade is sort of important to know. It's a silly thing that you might think doesn't make much sense, but when you're in the thralls of a crazy motorcade, if you just know where you're sitting, it makes your life so much easier. And so things like that, but also you don't want to get lost in that, and you want to make sure that your own personality comes through. So one of the things we do is we throw pancake brunches, and we've had royalty in our dining room with their kids eating Nutella and pancakes and playing video games and things like that. And so one of the great things that when my wife first joined, she had a mentor, and she said, you succeeded as a Canadian diplomat when there's a world leader rolling on the floor with your dogs. So there's this balance, though, you have to take. Like, you have to make sure you're using it at the right time, but you also have to try and, put yourself out there. So think about that when you're out there. And when you're in these situations, if you're going to official events or meeting officials at some point with your spouse, figure out that balance for yourself. And it's something you can kind of learn on your first and second post, but, it's something, definitely learn etiquette and protocol, because it's everywhere, particularly in your spouse's life. But don't focus in on it. Don't freak out about it too much. The other thing I want to talk about was the best piece of advice I ever got when I first went on my other post was, be prepared for everything and expect nothing. this can go on a line of everything. I've seen a few questions, people talking about employment, people talking about, what's family life going to be like? What are our friends going to be like? I wish we don't really have the answers because every post is very unique. There isn't really a great answer for everything, but you can learn little bits from people who have been on posts, and there's little things you can try and sort of prepare for, but really prepare for everything, expect nothing, read all the reports, but know that maybe the reports are outdated. Things have changed. Things can change. I'm in Myanmar right now. Last month, this place was completely different than it was today. So changes can happen on posts. So reports are going to fall behind. They're going to be outdated fairly quickly in some cases, in some posts where there's deterioration or things getting better. So, prepare yourself for everything. Get as prepared as you possibly can, but really just go in there with an open mind. The person that told me this said, one day he started an NGO in one post, and then in another post, he learned how to surf. So you really have this, you can go both ways. And so keep an open mind to that sort of thing. And this is something, I'll be honest, I even forget this myself. Every post, I forget this advice until I'm about a month into post. And I realize, okay, I prepared for everything, but everything fell apart. And now I'm sort of rediscovering what's there and rediscovering what's sort of on the open thing. This is a big part. I know there's been a few questions about employment. I mean, do what you can to try and get employment set up, but know that, it could be in your first year. It might not work out, and you're going to have to leave this, a job that you might have, or it might might not work out and you might not get a job until, you're there, or may not even have one for your entire post. So, explore different things about your personalities, and just sort of put that out there. My stuff's a little more existential. The one thing I will say about the shopping, though, a good tip for learning about what to buy in grocery stores is watch television commercials, because a lot of times the packaging doesn't have any English on it. But if you're watching a television commercial and you see somebody mopping, then that's the stuff you buy with your mop, and you just sort of, maybe take a picture with your phone and bring it to the grocery store. It's a silly little tip, but that works out. The only other thing is understand the ups and downs of being on post. You're going to have culture shock, and culture shock is not going to knock on your door the first day and then go away once it's done. It's going to go up and down. We found the best thing is just to know it's culture shock and know that you're going to have, every once in a while, you're going to freak out. Everything's going to be weird and wrong, and you're going to wish you were home. And then if you just sort of sit there and go, okay, this is culture shock, I'll freak out for a couple of days, it will go away. It's a constant up and down cycle. And so there's all kinds of stuff like that, to know that that's going to happen, to know that, there is unexpected, but to sort of be prepared for the unexpected is the best piece of advice I can kind of give you. So I think that's all I've got for now. So.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris. I like that tip about taking the photos to the grocery store. I have to say I have been very spoiled on my current post. So my spouse actually works Ottawa hours, which means in Turkey that he actually has his days free from kind of morning till mid-afternoon. And so he has been the one having to read Turkish labels at the grocery store. I've been a little bit saved from that so far, but I'm going to store that suggestion away for future posts. So we did also consider talking about kind of challenges overcome as a next topic. I do think our panelists have touched on that a little bit. And I think maybe just also in the interest of time, there's been quite a few questions posted in the chat. We've kind of responded to a few of them. But I think maybe given the sort of interactive nature and the sort of rare opportunity for viewers to kind of speak to these experienced overseas spouses, I think maybe we'll use a bit more of our time, I think, for questions, if that's okay for everyone. So just before we do go into that, I am just going to take a little moment for some kind of self-promotion. Well, not myself, but promotion of this network, because I think a lot of what we've been talking about here today, the panelists have talked about the importance of being informed, making those connections, and seeking support. So again, this is really where I want to extend an enthusiastic invitation to everyone watching this to participate in whatever way is most comfortable for you in this new Canadian Diplomatic Family Network, the Réseau des Familles Diplomatiques du Canada. There is a wealth of information in that community, and there's many initiatives that are ongoing right now. We're sort of establishing the governance. Heather here on the call today is instrumental to that, to kind of understand what the goals of the network will be. But we know that one of them is getting information into the hands of spouses more readily. It's one of the things we hear a lot about. And some of those questions that are being mentioned in the chat, talking about sort of some of the technicalities about work permits, about aging parents, about work hours, about telework, all these kinds of things. These are questions that everyone has. However, it's at the moment, there isn't really sort of one particular place to get all those questions answered. And so I don't really think that we will wade into those technicalities here. That's not sort of what any of us, that's not really what our role is. And there isn't really, it seems, somebody who has that role. So we're trying to kind of establish a place where we can bring all this information together, because agreed, having 6 different Facebook groups is not really an ideal solution for sharing this really important data. People don't use social media for different reasons or can't access it. So we are planning to do a standalone website where we can bring together some of this sort of non-protected information to be shared more easily. As I mentioned a couple of times, we do have this survey that's going on right now. The idea behind this is to gather information about the personal circumstances, opinions, and priorities of partners like yourselves, of diplomats who have been, will be, or who are currently at Canadian missions abroad. And by participating in the survey, we're really trying to get this kind of hard data that's going to help us negotiate, help establish maybe some changes to policy. So again, we would encourage you, it takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes to complete the survey. It is available in English or in French. And we'd encourage you to share that in your networks. The more responses we get, the more valuable that data is. In addition, recently there was a networking event that took place in Ottawa, and we're hoping there'll be more of those to come. We have people on the committee who are working on training, so that's compiling the trainings that are available to spouses currently, as well as creating some future trainings. We're researching what other jurisdictions are doing, what they provide for diplomatic dependents, again, hoping to kind of form some recommendations. So just a few items that this committee is working on, because basically whether you are brand new to this world or you have been on post before, as you say, a lot of those concerns or questions that you have are the same questions and concerns that hundreds of other families are facing. We know it's frustrating. We know it's a lot of bureaucracy to get your minds around. But I'm just letting you know that there is this community out there. Right now, it exists on Facebook. We're hoping that to move it to a kind of more private platform. But please do reach out, ask those questions, maybe search in the Facebook group first, whatever question you have. It's very, very likely that it has been asked before. And I think we've actually also talked about developing some kind of Q&A documents for those extremely frequently asked questions. So that's my promotion there of the network. And so, yes, we have about 20 minutes left. So I think maybe what we'll try to do is maybe I'll read some of these questions out that haven't been answered from the Q&A. I'll read them out to the floor. And panelists, please feel free to jump in if there's something that you feel like you can answer. Again, I am going to kind of stay away from those technical ones that have to do with specifically supporting dependents and things. None of us really are experts here, I would say, from the the sort of policy official guidance perspective. Okay, so same thing about like citizenship. Okay. Is there an email list for events or news? If only the Facebook group exists currently, what's the ETA for the transition to a website? Would love to access the community one day. So yeah, I mean, really, we started this conversation about having a committee like in February. So we're talking just a couple months ago. So all of those items that I've mentioned to you, I mean, we're actually moving at kind of like lightning speed compared to how a lot of committees operate. But I do see Patrick's hand is up, so maybe I'll let him take a stab at this one. Go ahead, Patrick.
So we're just waiting to confirm some financing, and the website will be up pretty quickly. I can announce that it will be the name of our association in English and French.com. So keep that in mind, and maybe you can have a look in a few weeks for that information. And I raised my hand because of that last question, recommendations on how to create your social circle. I'd say that there are like 3 types of people in this life. You have the newcomers, the stayers, and the leavers. So we all share similar experience. We live it differently, but we are all going through one of these phase, or and I wish I've known not to be guilty about asking more questions. So Heather mentioned earlier, volunteering. It's a great opportunity to meet people outside of just people from the mission, or on a mission like here in Kazakhstan, the embassy is very small, so it's good to connect with other expats. There are associations. If you speak French, there's Alliance Française or Accueil Association everywhere. So the French government sponsors Accueil Ankara, Accueil Astana, and these are volunteers from the French community that gather, and normally they organize activities, but also visits to different parts of the city. So it could be very interesting to actually play the tourist a little bit in your new city with them. And there are also all the school activities where I met a lot of people. So it's easier with kids, I think, to meet people, but at some point there are several associations or Facebook groups, or normally Americans have a newsletter in different missions. So if you can get added to that newsletter, or that group, you can have more information about their activities and meet more people. And I'd say it's pretty much, I always considered that it was up to me on how my experience was easy or very difficult, in the fact that I build my own network. I didn't expect much from the embassy, and sometimes it can be great, and sometimes it changed. Like Chris said earlier, things change very quickly. When I was in Turkey, I had the chance to be a community coordinator, and I built a blog and all those things. But Meg arrived a few months after I left, and nothing was left of that. So you never know. People change and things change. Prices change, business change. So the best advice is to build your own network with other expats. And I'd say go out and be a tourist. It's worth it. Take the red bus, that bus where the headphones never work. You can discover the city and then share it with other people, and it's worth doing it.
Awesome. Some great tips there. It looks like Heather's hand was up next. Please go ahead, Heather.
So following up a little bit about what Patrick was saying about getting involved and looking for things, I've also found it helpful to just create things myself. Like when my one child wanted to take like hip hop kit dancing, we couldn't find it, and so I just found a English speaking teacher and opened our attic up and had a class. Social media, I know there's a lot of negatives about that, a lot of great positives. Not accessible in every country, of course, but that is an opportunity with Facebook these days, like that we didn't have when I first started, when we first went to Dusseldorf. Facebook was just starting up in those years, to create your own groups and get like-minded people together and sharing those. I would also like to give a little bit of a heads up on coming back to Ottawa. Headquarters, even if you've lived in Ottawa before going on posting and you're familiar, you've got friends, whatever, it's a posting. Like you come back and everybody else is going on with their lives. It's actually, for me, has always been the hardest. This is only our second time back, and this time, after this is our 3rd year, and I'm doing well. I'm okay now, but I find it much more lonely coming back here. So again, volunteering and getting involved, finding groups, which of course, when you have the language, makes it much easier than at post. And the reason I originally had raised my hand was to talk about connecting with our new network. So one of the things on the governance team that we're working on is how to set up a membership. structure without fees, certainly for the first year or so, but that will give us direct contact with people and an email list to be able to keep in touch. So that's coming, that's actually on our priority list. So that's coming soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then I think Feli wanted to speak next. Go ahead, Feli.
Thanks, Megan. I just wanted to pick up on a few things that others have said. I mean, I completely, what Patrick was saying about staying away from some of that negativity, because there are some people that are insanely negative, but, and it is, and not just diplomats and not just Canadians, I mean, like in the expat community in general. And I think this webinar, especially on things like this, so these are things that get you prepared, because I think some of those people that are really negative are not prepared. They haven't looked into it. They kind of went in with rose-colored glasses. They thought they were going on a 24/7 holiday. And at the end of the day, life is life, and there are ups and downs. And a friend of mine explained it to me really well, actually. She said it's like often like living in Technicolor. Like, it's when you're really up, it's great, you're on holiday, or you're having these really great moments, you're exploring a new city. But when you're down, you don't have your friends, your best friends, your family around. I've lost family when I've been overseas. It's really, really difficult. I'm sure it's really difficult when you're there as well. I've had to get on a plane and go home. It's really difficult to be in that situation. So there are definitely things that loneliness is a huge aspect. And I think showing our age, especially since I kind of started this lifestyle and journey, mental health is definitely spoken about more, and there's more opportunities to reach out. And I would recommend that people look into that before going on posting, look at what your department or what your partner's department can offer, and have that number, saved and written down, and connect with them and understand what they can provide for you. We've seen comments in the Facebook group like, can you recommend a child therapist or a child psychologist? So these are just some recommendations of, if you are about to go on posting, maybe just have a think about those things, be preemptive about it, because it is difficult, even with social media, sometimes to find that information once you're overseas. Or look about where you're going and seek that information early. But I also want to say, I mean, that's, I guess, putting it slightly, it's not meant to put a negative spin. When I say stay away from negativity, I guess what I just like to say is, it's a balance, and you're allowed to feel really down. You're allowed to have a day where you go, this life totally sucks. I would say don't go down that rabbit hole of negativity. Remember that we do live a very privileged life and be grateful for that, but you're totally allowed to hate it sometimes. You're totally allowed to want to get on a plane and go home. And as Patrick, I think, or maybe Chris mentioned, there are different people that stick around, people that leave. It's okay also if you decide it's not for you. It's not for everyone. And I would say that something that I've learned, and we talked a bit about this in terms of, we were going to talk about challenges overcome, but I think that originally I was working in the Australian government. I put a lot of my self-worth into work. And when I went on this journey, I thought that I was able to let that go when I first started. And I realized actually as I went along that actually I did put a lot of my self-worth into that. And then I found a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things. And I was able to reach, someone asked a question about professional goals. And my comment about that, I think, was that actually I was able to reach a lot of my professional goals, but it wasn't a straight line. Like, I love organizing things. I love helping people. I love, working in development or working in, security, political analysis. These are things that I wanted to do. And I was actually able to do a lot of these things, but it wasn't the straight line, especially if you're already in the government and then you see your partner in, that is often the straight line that you see in government. They're going to FS1 and FS2, and then we're going to do this. Be open to, like Heather said, everything leads to something. Nothing is a waste of time. And so I also did the community coordinator position. Through that position, I met someone, because we used to host a lot of events in Ghana. Someone from an NGO said, hey, you'd be really good at this job. We need someone to be the country manager and organize volunteer programs across Ghana. And so that's how I met that person. Then I got that job. That job was actually an NGO with a Canadian NGO. When we came back to Canada, he then was Canadian, who was able to be my reference for government jobs, and it helped because it was a Canadian NGO. And then the organizing experience led to something else. So don't ever think that, don't surround yourself by people that think that things are beneath you, or, you know, that they won't do a job, the NGO job. I had people around me saying, why would you do that? It doesn't pay anything. Like, it pays, you know, at the time, I think it was less than $1,000 a month. Like, I was getting paid, but you know, that was good in Ghana. And it was probably still one of my favorite jobs I've ever done. So don't discount something because you're holding on to this idea that my professional development needs to be a straight line, or that I'm not getting enough money for what I think I should be doing. Look at what it maybe brings you as a person. And if you feel that you personally are if you look at yourself really closely and say, I'm actually really driven by money, I would say that this is probably not the right place for you. And that it's not a bad thing. It's just something maybe you need to think about, because this is definitely not going to make you a millionaire, I would say, as a spouse that is following their partner. So it's just something about self-awareness. And I think also, you know, taking a hard look at yourself and thinking what you want. And this is, I think what we decided as a couple was, this is such a great opportunity. We think we've had a great life, and the positives have far outweighed the negatives for us. So yeah, so I think it's, so I just want to add that, because there's a lot of negativity. I do think there's room for improvement, definitely in the professional area. But I do think that there's other ways we can go about it. Then we need to lean on each other to find those opportunities. So I'll hand over to Chris, because I know Chris has got his hand up.
Yeah, please go ahead, Chris.
Okay. I noticed there was one question somebody mentioned about keeping in touch with family and friends. I wish I had a totally positive answer for that, because I know this has been a positive thing, but that is a really challenging thing to do. And you likely, at least in my case, and a lot of people I've talked to, you're likely going to lose touch with some of your friends and maybe be a little bit further away from your family, and, you know, not being able to connect the same way. But I've actually become better friends with other friends of mine, because of the way that we talk and everything. So maybe people that, you know, weren't in Ottawa, that I didn't speak too much, I talk to them all the time now, because, you know, I'm overseas. It's the same sort of amount of difficulty. So that is a challenge. It's something you can kind of set up, but time differences, as well as just the fact that you're sort of living a different life than a lot of people, I would say it's kind of difficult to keep in touch. You have to work at it for sure. The friends that you want to keep and the family members that you want to keep close to you, it's going to take some work to keep in contact with them, because they're going to have a very hard time, not only with the time differences, but just connecting with the life you now live. I'm in Myanmar right now. There's a civil war happening around me. Nobody in my family can at all relate to what's going on in my life. And so when I call them and complain, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, a bomb went off down the street and there's military jets flying over me every day, they're like, you should come home. And I'm like, no, I don't have to come home. It's not safe. I'm just venting a little bit. And so it is difficult, because you are going to, you know, your relationship with your family and your friends is going to change. But in some ways, I've become better friends, like I said, with certain people and with certain family members. So it's going to be a change in you. So it's a challenge. And again, as I said before with my original thing, you can't really plan it until you're there, but you're going to find that when you're there, you're going to sort of connect with certain people back home better and differently than you did before. And again, it's a life-changing thing. This is going to be a life-changing thing for you going on your post, but it in some ways it can be really valuable and interesting and amazing, like crazy. It's a crazy experience, to be honest. This is, you know, a crazy life. If you had to ask me, my you know, teenage self, are you ever going to live this life? I'd be like, nobody lives that life. So but it's a lot of fun. It's really cool, but you know, it can be challenging at times. And I think everybody's mentioned a couple times the ups and downs. You're going to be frustrated, and you'll see if anybody on the Facebook page, I will sit there and freak out about something that's bothering me. But then, you know, you calm down, you chill out, and that's okay. And, you know, we in this group understand that too, that if you're sitting on the Facebook page and you're frustrated with one thing, or on the new group and you're just really mad, you want to take it out and you're yelling, and we're the people you can yell at because nobody at GAC will listen to you at all. We totally understand where you're coming from. We will totally let you vent for a little bit and help you any way we can. So keep in mind that even the seasoned pros, we're doing that too. So, but yeah, that's it. Just keep an open mind and remember your life's about to change, but it could be for an amazing way. And generally for me, it has been.
Great. I love it. Heather, did you want one last minute, and then Patrick, one more minute?
Just really quickly, following what Chris was talking about, your relationships changing, whatever, expect that your children are going to want to be living abroad when they grow up as well. I have a 33-year-old daughter who is UK based, and she finished her university degree. My one son wants to be a diplomat. The other one wants to study university in Europe. No interest in staying in Canada whatsoever. So it's our own fault. But that happens. And on a positive note, in regards to coming back to Ottawa, we do have the International Club of Ottawa, which is a very nice organization that just recently has I'm on the executive. One of my big things has been to change the constitution to allow Canadian men to join. We've allowed international men to join, but not Canadian men. So anyway, so that's an opportunity when you come back to connect with internationals. That's one of the main reasons I was interested in joining it. And again, volunteering, meeting nice, new, friendly people. So there's hope.
Brilliant. Patrick, one more comment?
Yes, I was listening to Chris talking about being open-minded, and I saw your comments about stepping outside of your comfort zone. I remember that something I wish I knew was to take the opportunity to get my government clearance. It's something that spouses can do, and if you don't do it prior to posting, it can be a lot more complicated once you're abroad. But once you have that clearance, you can take on any job at the embassy. And sometimes jobs are just shredding paper, but sometimes interesting position can open. At some point, I was always working alone on my computer by myself, and things were good professionally, but I was always alone. So there was an opportunity to be readiness coordinator at the mission. That means planning everything to be ready for the next zombie apocalypse or something like that. So it's very interesting. It's an area that I knew nothing about. And even if, like Philly mentioned also, the salary is not always the best. Well, I ended up knowing a lot of people from the embassy. I ended up making a lot of connections with people, and I need human connections, even if I'm happy with the job that I'm doing. If I'm working by myself, I was glad to find that other way to meet with people. And you end up meeting more people about at the embassy, understanding how the embassy works. And I think it ended up for me being very useful because my network of diplomats became bigger and bigger, because the people that you learn today will be working somewhere else tomorrow. So it ends up being pretty exponential at some point. So even if it's not something that you think you will like, it's worth trying some of these contracts at the embassy, and then you're getting a new expertise in a domain that will be required in each posting, because they do have readiness teams everywhere, or they do have trade teams or immigration teams everywhere, almost.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. I would sort of underline that too, although I'm not a spouse, I'm not technically on the panel here. I'll speak for my husband in that I would just say, anytime he has said yes to opportunities, even if they were outside of his comfort zone, they have typically led to great things. So whether that means taking language training with some spouses who you've never met before, kind of putting yourself in a vulnerable position, it's led to good family friends. When he said yes to contracts at the embassy that were far below his pay scale that he was used to as a economist with a master's degree, it did end up leading to an actual term position with a ministry paying Canadian salaries. So just be open to those opportunities as they come, and I think you'll rarely regret it. So we are in our last minute here of the webinar. So I do just want to say a huge thank you to our 4 panelists who have opened themselves up, shared their personal experiences, and I thank PAFSO for hosting this today, and for all of the participants who've spent their time with us this morning or afternoon or evening, asked these great questions. And again, I hope this really is just the beginning of an ongoing conversation. You will find all of your panelists here today in that Facebook group. I think we would love to have you participate in our network, continue to ask questions. And I've also put my email there in the Q&As. You're welcome to reach out to me personally. I'm happy to kind of put you in the right direction if I don't have the questions or the answers to your questions specifically. So yeah, I just see lots of thank yous in the Q&As to our panelists as well. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.